Hi, this is Peter Torscher, your guide to the best you. Thanks for tuning into my podcast, the first one of the new year, 2021. And with the new year, I'd like to make a new start. And instead of just me giving my monologue on my personal development and philosophical ideas, I've always been a person who's enjoyed conversation. And with that in mind, I had a conversation with my friend and colleague, Tobias Demker, who joins me today. And we will start doing these podcasts together, having more of a dialogue and discussing different topics. So, with that, Toby, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and we'll take it from there.
All right. Well, thanks, Peter, for inviting me to kind of your forum, your platform. It's a great idea to be able to have these conversations about really interesting topics that we both share. So that it's a real pleasure. But yeah, if I should just mention something about myself. I mean, you know me quite well already, but yeah, I'm from Sweden. I have a big or a long background in China, so I've been spending almost 20 years in China, and that's what I work a lot with China still, and especially in the field then of leadership development, primarily. Leadership development, organizational development, team development. So I'm one of these consultants that mixes my time of consulting, facilitating, coaching, and also training. So I work with uh, big and small clients, mostly global companies. I also teach an MBA in at the University of Otago, especially for Chinese students, and I'm doing some research on the side. So doing a lot of different things, but it's all in this field of consulting around leadership development and personal development. So we share a lot of passion for some of these topics, I know, and we worked together. Was it 2019? We started working together, right?
Exactly, exactly. And so I guess that's where we found sort of a lot of the commonality in our ideas, both personal development. Obviously, for me on the coaching side, I work a lot with both private and on the business level. But I think we both had a lot in common in terms of just philosophically and on the personal development side, also working with leaders, managers in industry, and finding ways to make a positive impact on those kind of people. So yeah, I think it was our conversations on those road trips to China, being able to sort of share ideas and all of the things you've learned over the years, and just sort of some of the sharing authors we've read and ideas we find interesting. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I mean that's some of the things that we do share in common is that I think both of us are quite interested to and open to new ideas and like to get different kind of perspectives on those. So who knows where these conversations what they can lead to really. But we also have a lot of common interests. I know, like in sports and music and yeah, just philosophy and a lot of different topics, I guess.
Absolutely. So, and I think, well, where we both wanted to start with today, because it is a new year, but also with starting a new project, it's always good to get. I mean, I know it's something we both believe in. It's good to be very clear on purpose. I think we both believe in purpose-driven organizations, but also in our own approach to the kind of work that we do, it's very much purpose-led. So yeah, I thought maybe we'd start by sharing, our purpose for doing this podcast and sharing our knowledge with other people. So yeah, do you want to go first and share your insights into your purpose, why you do what you do, and maybe why we're doing this podcast?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I think it's a really great topic to start with because, as you said, both of us realize the importance of being clear on purpose, either if it's for yourself as an individual or, of course, for an organization. And we all know, when it comes to leadership and leadership development, to have that clarity and being able to communicate that purpose is crucial. It's extremely important. But for if we put it in the context of what we're doing here and our conversations here, I guess it's, for me, the purpose is really to learn and develop. I mean, I mentioned already that both of us are open to new ideas. So the purpose for having these conversations is just to, of course, have fun with it, but also explore new ideas, look at different perspectives of things around the topics that we do share. So for me, it's very simple. The purpose is simply to just learn, develop, and look at interesting topics from different perspectives.
Yeah, that's a little secret I don't always share with my coaching clients, is that I'm constantly learning and gaining new insights as I work with people. Um, but certainly I think for me, the my purpose for the coaching and the development work that I do with people has always been about helping people find their own highest potential. That's kind of the bottom line for everything that I do now in this work. And I think for me, doing the podcast allows me to have conversations or share ideas, and hopefully people will have those aha moments, or kind of be triggered to go out and investigate more on the topics we talk about, or get some thinking a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, when we chat, we always, I think we always find something new and interesting from each other, and certainly my personal growth is an ongoing journey and probably always will be, and I think the sharing part of it is just hoping that other people get a little bit of the same that we get out of our own conversations, and I think for those people who are interested in continually developing themselves and trying to improve and maximize their own potential, I think that's really my purpose. But for me, it's more than just a lot of people who are like these high performance coaches, or people who want to help high achievers. They really focus a lot on just performance, and as I've been a basketball coach in the past. I've done a lot of different things. We've both been involved in music, but for me, achieving your potential is it's not just about the reaching your highest performance, not even in sports, reaching your maximal level of enjoyment. Nihai Csikszentmihalyi in his book on flow, and he talks a lot about happiness. And I think it's funny because I think happiness is quite underrated as a sort of something that you're trying to achieve on a regular basis, this state of happiness. Because it's funny when I try to, I've written a blog about this before too, and I talk about this where happiness is a really important thing. A lot of people think that, well, I've got to be successful and I've got to healthy, obviously, but you don't see people, really happy people, authentically happy people aren't people who abuse kids or are involved in crime, or alcoholics. The really authentic people, that helps them be more focused and really live the best version of themselves. So happiness is also a piece in there. I've written a book about it as well. So that's a really big cornerstone to achieving your full potential, also your highest level of happiness. So
sure, you're tapping into authenticity here and the importance of being true to yourself. And then now we're really getting into the topic, I guess, but looking at what is your personal purpose. You're tapping into what are your values, what's important for you, what makes you happy, etc. And to create a real clarity around that, of course, make things a lot easier. I was thinking a little bit about that yesterday as well when we were discussing this topic, what's your purpose? And I remember that if you look at 7 Habits, Stephen Covey's book, he talks a lot about creating or writing down your own personal statement, or your mission statement, right? What's your purpose? We talk a lot about that with organizations, like you have to have your mission statement, etc. But what about as an individual? Do you actually have one, or?
It's sort of a vision statement, or a mission statement?
A mission statement or a purpose statement. So what's the purpose for you as a person for being around, for being here.
Yeah, well, for me, there's a couple of things. For me, I always think of things in terms of how can I add more value? How can I add value? Whether it's in a working relationship, in situations where I'm volunteering my time, it's always about how do I add value. And I think the other piece of people think of you've seen books written about this, the biggest regrets when you die, and so on. And I think for me, the only thing I would ever I'm not a big regret person. I think I've come to terms with my past pretty well. But for me, it's always looking back and did I make the most with the time I had. And so for me, sort of the mission is always, as much as I'm trying to help other people achieve their highest potential, it's always, have I done enough with the potential that I have? So for me, it's this continually achieving my highest potential that's kind of my mission statement or my vision for going forward. And that it's kind of funny. My at the end of my marriage, my ex-wife, those were tense times, and she was like, since I've known you, you've been working on yourself, sort of with this, when is it ever going to end? And I'm like, well, never. Hopefully, never. Hopefully, there'll always be something to learn and grow, and so for me, it's always this constant growth and learning and becoming a better version of myself. And the idea of, people talk about competition a lot, and I try and remind people that you're really only in competition with who you were yesterday, right? It's always this one-upping yourself rather than other people. So yeah, does that kind of answer your question? I kind of a roundabout way.
I guess. No, I mean, it makes me think also about what I talk about with any kind of student or participant in any workshop. When we talk about leadership, what does the perfect leader look like? And of course, after a few seconds, everybody realizes, well, you can't be a perfect leader. It doesn't exist. So there's always this need to continuously develop. But I'm also thinking it can be very stressful, right? To have that kind of pressure on yourself that I always have to do better. I was working with a client before, and they had big T-shirts saying like the only easy day was yesterday. You have to work harder and harder. And sure, it makes sense, but it also need to think about the stress management and what's really then. Gets back to that. What's really important for you, and what makes you relax, and what makes you happy. So for me, when I was thinking about that personal kind of mission statement or my purpose, for me it's more about tapping into the values that I have, and it's all about kindness. That I want to have kind interactions with the people that I come across, and have a positive impact in the relationships with people that I have around me. And again, looking forward to when we're getting closer to our final days. I guess I want to look back and see that I probably had a positive impact on the people around me, and I was kind to people, and these kind of values are at center for me, and fulfilling these values, that's kind of the purpose for me being here, I guess.
Yeah, I can.
Simply put,
Yeah, no, I can totally relate to that. I think that's something that Dalai Lama talks a lot about, compassion, right? And I think that's for me all about this whole process of being the best version of yourself, right? So achieving your own highest potential is being the best version of yourself, and that definitely, as I said, it doesn't it's not just about high performance. It's about your values, your level of happiness, but also your level of compassion, and the things that you can give and add to the world, the contribution that you make. Those are all things. I think that all kind of ultimately tie into purpose, and I think that it's to try and sum it up in one line is not always easy, but that's kind of my highest potential thing is or being the best version of myself is that's my purpose, and I think it encompasses that. But I think it's important to point out, as you just did, that it's not ever about trying to achieve perfection, because there's no such thing, right? It's just always trying to continue this evolution that we're all part of, right?
Yeah, and I guess I also find that in a lot of stuff that I do, but especially in work, when I'm working with clients, this need to always go back and look at, what are the objectives? What are we trying to achieve? What's the purpose of doing this? Because it's so, our environment is so complicated, so we all kind of constantly sort of get off track. And what I find that really a lot of really good leaders do, that they're really good at that, bringing us back to the purpose. What are we here to do? What's the focus? Why are we having this conversation? We should be talking about this, or whatever it is. But just having that extreme focus and clarity around the purpose or the objectives, I just find that really it's difficult. It's so much more difficult to do than to actually talk about. But then just it's the importance of it is phenomenal.
Yeah, and I know that you and I are both fans of Simon Sinek, and Start With Why. Putting that, I remember years ago when I first heard his TED Talk about the golden circle and the why being at the center of it, and just wow, I've never heard it put so succinctly. There's things we know intuitively, but then someone kind of puts underlines the point for you. But I think that's exactly the thing to always be able. That's why you start with why, so that you can always come back to it. And there's so many elements to purpose-led work, and you'll see now, especially in organizations or businesses that are competing for resources, right, for the talent that they want to acquire. More and more people that work in a field where they're in demand look for higher purpose and not just their salary. And I know we're both familiar with Dan Pink's work on motivation, and so one of his three pillars is purpose, right? So purpose is being as a key motivator, and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi also in terms of getting into that flow state. He always having some kind of purpose to your work, and Nietzsche had this line about he who has a why to live can bear almost any how, right? So these are things that are repeated through history that show that if you have a strong sense of purpose, if purpose is in the forefront, you'll find the drive to get it done. And so I think you'll see that both in successful companies and successful individuals, right? When they have a clear sense of purpose. And so your point is right. I mean, if you're going to be a good manager, a good leader, it's so easy to get lost in the minutiae, to get lost in all the details, or to only look at sort of the very one-dimensional metrics by which we measure our success, and we lose sight of the reason we even got started. I think that's the reason why people lose the passion and the fun in their job or in the company or anything they're doing, in their relationships, and they forget what values drove them to get into where they began, and purpose is such a huge part of that, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you look back at leadership theory, I think from in the 60s, Edwin Locke, when he was talking about goal setting theory, he found that this sense of purpose, that it's so motivating for individuals in the workforce, and that's why it becomes important, and that translates then into objective setting, etc. But what is interesting now with what you mentioned with the younger generation, that people are more and more looking into working with organizations that have a clear purpose, that are ethically sound, sustainable, and connecting their own values to their own work, because it's something that you're probably going to do for a long time. So I think that's really encouraging, actually, in one of the few maybe encouraging things that are happening in the world today.
Yeah, what that brings to mind, we were one of the workshops we did in Shanghai in 2019. There was one of the managers that we had in that group said, one of his most inspiring CEOs was very clear. He talked about 3 Ps. He said people, planet, and profit. Those in that order, right? And so that really gave just such a clear definition of the values, and then you can really build purpose around that. So, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there.
No. Also, I mean, talking about that workshop, it was kind of, the context for that workshop was really looking into a more agile way of working and more contemporary in the sense where organizations need to be today. And I think that's also some of the complexities around purpose setting and goal setting now, that maybe the purpose it stays, but the goals and the objectives, they change all the time and faster and faster. So I'm just sort of guessing here, but maybe it's becoming more difficult, but also more important to go back to that purpose to enable us to be agile enough to work with the objectives in an effective way. Because the environment, if we look at organizations that were working 50 years ago, it was pretty clear what was going to happen in the markets for the next few decades or whatever. Now we're looking at windows of a few months maybe. So, how do you connect your purpose with the objectives that we're having in sort of in that short of a time span? I don't have the answers to that, but I think it's interesting challenges for companies and leaders to work with.
Absolutely, and it's interesting where it used to be, just produce a better product and make the most margin as you can. I mean, those were kind of the foundations of our of economic theory and business, and it's great to see how business has evolved. And businesses don't evolve unless the individuals in those companies evolve. So whether it's people on an individual, and this is another thing I think maybe now I come to think of it, that this whole COVID situation has really demonstrated that you see. In the news, you see a lot of the negative, but in terms of community, I've seen a lot of positives. I remember back last April, where things were first in lockdown, I was talking to someone in Ireland who said, we've got getting out into the community, helping deliver meals to old people who don't want to leave their homes, and I think I've seen a lot of that over this year, where people are very conscious of mental health and making sure that the people they care about, just calling them out of the blue and just having a longer conversation with them. Whereas, in the normal pace of life, we let these things pass us by, but we kind of get back to our values as we are put in challenging situations. And the way you get through a lot of these tough times is by having a clear sense of purpose, is by knowing who you are and what your values are and what the purpose behind what you're trying to achieve in life. So whether it's on an individual level or within companies, I think the companies that are going to survive the financial impact of this difficult year we've had are going to be those people who are very clear about their sense of purpose, the vision that they have, because now it's just kind of getting back to work. Even though there's tough times, people will get through it because they have this sense of meaning in the work that they do, right?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I've been working on a quite big project it's a cultural transformation program for a very, very big organization. And we had a meeting the other day, sort of reviewing the work. And it seems like the pandemic context, if we look at the COVID situation globally, has worked as a catalyst for kind of accelerating the receptiveness of change. So we're talking about reinforcing, not new, but reinforcing the values in the organizations. And in this context, when people are missing this human connection, you're missing working together, you're missing some of the collaboration and the empathy and whatever. It seems like this context has really been working as a catalyst for people to really dive in and accept these values in a much higher way than they probably would have otherwise. So I mean, what I'm saying is that I think that also think that this pandemic context might have been a blessing in disguise for a lot of organizations that have the opportunity to then to reset uh, maybe the purpose. I mean, in this case, it's more about the values and the culture of the organizations, but that goes back to the purpose. I mean, what that's kind of the starting point, right? So it will be interesting to see, looking back with a bit more of data. Now it's more of a hunch, right? But what's happened in terms of change management, in terms of cultural transformation in organizations in 2020.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think this has been a time of reflection for a lot of people. So those people who were very clear on their purpose before probably had an easier time getting through. Not an easy time, but an easier than people who had just kind of had their head down all these years. I know a lot of people are rethinking their lives. If you look at the big cities in the world, and you see people from London, New York, Rome. I've talked to people from all of those different cities who are saying, there's, I mean, it's probably exaggerated to say there's a mass exodus, but a lot of people are moving to the country to a simpler way of life because I think they're reflecting on, well, what's the meaning of what I'm doing? Other than accumulating things and growing my bank account. Look at the rent I pay in New York or London, and what's my quality of life for what I'm getting out of that. And so I think a lot of people, both on an individual level, are reevaluating, but also in terms of their careers. And so when you have people who earn enough to live in downtown London or New York, they obviously earn enough and are in a high level position that they can manage that, or they're high level entrepreneurs. And for them to be reflecting and going and reassessing their values says a lot. And so I think this could be a big reset, not like the economic forum talking about the big reset financially, but I think more importantly, on an emotional and on a mental level, getting back to what's really important to us and what, redefining that purpose. Just like you say, when you have a bigger project and you get off in too many directions and you circle back to, well, what's the real purpose we're trying to get at here? I think this is a good opportunity. This challenge that we're going through is a good opportunity to refocus, reassess. And I'm glad to see a lot of people are reflecting. Maybe sometimes in order to reflect better, taking a step back, making a significant change in your life is a good thing. So yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot happening.
Been forced to take that step back here now, and I think for a lot of people, I hear a lot of the people around me are seeing it as something actually quite positive, that you're able to spend more time with your family, reflect, as we're saying, about the important things in life. And it will be, probably for a lot of people, it will be a really big shift or transformation in the way we work. Also, of course, the technological support has been, or the technological infrastructure has helped us in that sense too. For sure. I mean, now you can sit in Germany, I can sit in Sweden, and we can have these conversations. Of course, we could before as well, but it's, it really stepped up, right? So
absolutely,
it's getting easier.
10 years ago, we couldn't have been doing this, but I think to even be working, would have been difficult for a lot of people. So we can be, I think it's good to reflect also on all the things we have to be grateful for.
Yeah, definitely.
So
when we're talking about this personal transformation for a lot of individuals, both you and I, especially you, work as coaches, and I was also thinking how this purpose setting fits into the coaching context, right, or the coaching conversations. And I was thinking about the different kind of coaching models that we might use, like Grow or Oscar or Clear or whatever. But it always starts with that. You can call it different things. You can call it goals or objectives, but it's always something about, what do you want to achieve? Maybe some kind of contracting, so we can understand the purpose of the context, or where do you want to go with this conversation, right?
Yeah.
So it seems to be a fundamental setting stone, not only in leadership models that I work with, or that we work with, but also in most coaching models. So it's it seems to be a real starting point in almost everything that has to do with personal development in some sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the Grow Models one that I work with a lot when I'm teaching managers how to coach their teams. And when we talk about the whole goal setting piece, the why of it is always there. What are you looking to achieve? And you mentioned before Stephen Covey. Obviously, I'm a big fan as well. And he always talks about start with the end in mind, right? So, and for me, there's an underlying theme of purpose with that sort of one of the 7 habits as well. So I think, again, everything from motivation to clarity. When I coach people, one of the big reasons they come to me is because, they're either, I'm trying to achieve this goal, so how do I get what I want? Or they're going, I'm trying to figure out what I want, and that desire for clarity is a big reason why people come to coaching, and there are a lot of different tools to get there, but it's one of the most asked questions, and so that to me says people have lost their sense of purpose or aren't really clear about their direction because they've forgotten why why they do what they do, right?
Yeah.
When you think of, I have a theory about people. A lot of people who start families, maybe they're super busy. I don't even know if they totally love kids or whatever, but they gain this sense of purpose from having children. And I think especially for, people who have a job that they, it's just a means to an end. It just pays the bills. They get a tremendous sense of purpose from raising these children. But then what happens when those, when you have the empty nest, when those kids grow up, and I have a few friends now whose kids are kind of getting into their late teens will be going off to study or travel the world or whatever. And then you have to kind of rethink, well, now what's my purpose, right? So, I think, we're constantly trying to make sense of the world we're in. And part of that is finding a meaning to why we're here and creating a purpose. So, I don't know how your philosophy, what your philosophy is around this, but for me, I'm not a big believer in a predetermined universe or some kind of predestined purpose. I think it's something you really need to define for yourself. So whether it's a personal level or organizationally.
No, that for me that taps into roles, right? Thinking about you have this one purpose, but then obviously in your life you fulfill different kind of roles. I mean, for me it's. I'm a professional. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a friend. I'm a member of a society. I'm a citizen. I'm with music groups or whatever. And in all of these different contexts, I play different roles. And sometimes I have to be more of the leading role. Sometimes I'm more of a follower or whatever. But the purpose is still. For me, it's still congruent. Whatever I do, I still want to be kind. I still want to have a positive impact. Also, I want to achieve personal development, and whatever I do, it all fulfills that purpose. Me and my wife, we started a little bit of a conversation just the other day of, the kids, they're very young still, so it's many years ahead, but when they're out, what happened, what is our life going to look like then? And I'm pretty sure it's going to be, for me, with my professional role or whatever, it's always going to be about that development. What can I do now? What is interesting now? What can I learn now? And hopefully to serve some kind of purpose for the greater good as well, to have this positive impact on other, if it's in organizations or individuals or, government or whatever, that doesn't matter, but just to serve a little bit of that purpose. For me, that's really important.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you're right. We do, looking at things systemically, we do play a lot of different roles in our lives to different people, and just making sure there is that congruence. I like that word. I use it often as well. It's about finding that balance. because for me, I got into coaching because of my own personal development journey, and coaching helps me continue to grow. But everything I do, anything that I try that's new. But just like you, I have my roles in life, and actually, one thing that I've just started doing that I found really rewarding, because actually my dog of many years passed away back in October. And I was about to give away all her stuff, and to my dog sitter, who is part of an organization that rescues dogs. And I said, make sure here's some supplies that the rescues. And then I thought, hey, well, I'm stuck at home for the next foreseeable future, as long as COVID's in play. And so I started fostering rescue dogs, right? And so and people are like, oh, it's so great what you're doing, and I'm like, actually, I get more out of it than the dogs do, because they get me out in the morning, into the fresh air. I'm out at least twice a day. I tend to go for walks with them 8 to 10 kilometers a day. And again, they really contribute to my happiness, but also it's a challenge. They're frightened animals. You need to be able to work with them, and so I realize I've learned a lot over the years from dealing with my own dog and other people's dogs, and sort of it's this constant sort of always bringing out those dogs bring out the best in me, and I think that's back to that whole purpose of trying to be the best version of myself. I think a lot of people get stuck in situations, or they allow themselves to be drawn into, they spend too much time with people that they say we're a product of the 5 people we spend the most time with, right? And I guess it's do those people help support my purpose, or are they congruent with my purpose? And so just all the people or all the environments that I put myself in, making sure those support me trying to achieve the highest version of myself and my own purpose. So yeah, and my, I love to write, so I've got that role as a writer. And again, that's always about so much of my writing, whether it's the fiction that I've been working on that I'll eventually publish, or the nonfiction that I do. I post my blog all the time, and the other book that I'm writing. It's always about that people. I do like the idea of helping people and sharing, but at the end of the day, it's so cathartic to write, and it's again a part of my own development. So yeah, I think you're right. It all, the more you look at it, the more life should circle back to that. And I'm not a big fan of the word "should," but you have that opportunity for it to all circle back to that fundamental purpose that you've given yourself. And when you do that, you'll feel fulfilled, you'll feel motivated, you'll feel happier. And so if you're not feeling happy, or you're not feeling, that your life is in balance, I think that's a really good point to go back and reflect, what do I really want? What is that purpose that I've given myself?
Yeah, and I mean to write that down as as I just mentioned, as a personal mission statement or a purpose statement or whatever.
Yeah.
Because now when we talk about it, it sounds like it's something really easy to do, but I don't think it is. I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time, and we've been spending years on maybe finding our own purpose, and it's not a easy journey, and just you get an idea. And I think that's also one of the difficult things about purpose, that it has to be, how do you know when it's true? Is it my own fabrication? Is it authentic? It's really difficult. So having these kind of conversations, it's really for me, it's also helping think about, what is really important for me. And when I'm being coached, that's what I enjoy most. You have an opportunity to put, if you're writing or just talking about something, you have an opportunity to put words to your thoughts. And that process kind of gains clarity for myself, at least. So, just talking about the purpose and reminding myself, and so it's. I'm glad I have the opportunity for this.
and well, that's the good thing about being surrounded by other coaches, is they're constantly challenging you as well, right? So, they question things like, when you're out with your friends, people aren't necessarily going, oh, so what's your purpose? And so being surrounded by coaches really does help, make sure you're being authentic and being, walking the walk and living the life that you're proposing other people could be living. And so yeah, I agree with you. I think the whole the whole reminding yourself or making it clear for yourself is really important. And that's a good point. And I'm going to think about a regular exercise for myself to ground myself back in that sense of purpose. But I think for me, I've just been living it for so long that it's second nature. But that doesn't mean I don't get off track sometimes, right? And so I think,
exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's good to find ways to remind yourself. Actually, just like in companies, when the profits start rolling in and there's all these different opportunities and you kind of get off in different directions, and then when is that moment when you circle back and go, well, actually, what's the purpose? I have actually there's a really great company that I'm doing some work with in Canada, and they produce beer and spirits, and I love their whole concept because they combine the art of producing craft beverages with the arts. So all of their packaging has different artists on it, and they pay the artists, and but their whole purpose is really creativity and community, right? Those are the two cornerstones of their organization. It's just so great to work with organizations that are so very focused, that have a really clear vision and a purpose to being a purpose-led organization. So I know you and I are the same that way. It's just when you can. Obviously, the big challenge is when you come into a company that doesn't have that sorted out, that there's a lot more work for you there. But when you can walk into an organization and do work with them that value what you're bringing because they're a purpose-led organization, that's just the ideal clients.
When it becomes part of everything you do in the organization, so all the actions and behaviors and everything is kind of, as you said, congruent with the purpose or the values. I mean, rather than just being a poster on the wall and then 2 weeks later you realize, oh, that was a bad word, we're going to change our values, and this is the new ones. And, it's not easy. Cultural transformation in that sense is very difficult.
Yeah.
And also on an individual level, I mean, we just talked about the difficulty of and the importance of reminding yourself. I just realized, I think it was last week, I have a little morning routine and I kind of set my intention for the day. And I realized as soon as I was done, it took me 5 minutes, I think, and I realized I was doing something that was in complete opposite of my intention for the day. At least I realized that. I said, now I have to kind of reset. But it's, we have our habits and ways of doing things that are, and external factors that influence us. It's difficult.
Yeah. And I think it's important not to be too hard on yourself and not too self-critical. I don't think that is the way, that's the way a lot of people were parented, through negative reinforcement, and you find out when you're wrong and don't get enough credit when you're on the right track. But I think just reinforcing the times when you recognize, yeah, that was a moment when I was really on purpose and I was really, living the best version of myself. And then it never becomes about criticizing the times that you weren't, but just noticing or recognizing how you can get yourself back on track, right? Just like in meditation, I have my daily meditation practice. And, the thing you always say about meditation, it's not when the thoughts come that distract you. It's about what you do after that moment, right? And that's all about getting back on track. And, the purpose of meditation, it's not to get, to get good at meditation. It's about to build that inner strength and really having that, gaining that insight from, it's becoming an observer of your own thoughts, but that in turn is meant to give you more peace in your life, more balance, and the ability to recognize when you're off purpose. And so, so having those moments to reflect are super important, and having, so taking the time to reflect, but also I'm going to make that actually a daily thing after my meditation in the mornings. I think now that you've pointed it out to me, I think I'm going to make that a daily addition to when I finish my meditation to go, okay, what am I going to do to further my purpose today?
Yeah, intention setting. That's it can be very powerful. For me, it kind of goes in waves. Sometimes I feel like, I'm really intentional and I'm doing it, and then you go on autopilot for a while, and then I have to remind myself. So yeah, it's a reminder. That's important.
Yeah, especially for myself, who, as you know, I go off on tangents. I have a very creative mind, and so I tend to. It's easy to get off track, and so especially for me, I find it's important to regroup, take moments to focus, and get back on. Okay, what am I trying to achieve here? So yeah. So
should we? I guess we're kind of getting to the end of the conversation pretty soon. But just to wrap things up then, so what is the purpose? Should we just sort of finalize that? What is and we can have different purposes, but what should be the purpose for this podcast?
Yeah, so again, it's in line with my purpose for helping people achieve their own highest potential. And I think through, for me, the purpose is to have these great conversations that you and I have when we have the opportunity to be able to make it an open forum and to share that out with others, and hopefully they can benefit and get a little closer to the best version of themselves. So for me, it's just about sharing knowledge and insights and sharing our own journey of personal development and development in our organizations so that other people can benefit. If that's not too vague a statement.
Well, I mean, we don't have to be super specific with this project, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, then it's very similar to mine. It's about what you say, but also I'm kind of selfish in that way, that I want to learn. I want to get your perspectives on things, maybe from others as well, of course. But just it's interesting to talk about topics that we both share a passion for, and by looking at and hearing some of your thoughts about it, I guess a lot of the thoughts are very similar, but maybe once in a while we can have different opinions about stuff, and or additional opinions, I should say. But then just it enriches the palette of knowledge and experience. That's what I'm interested in. So that's the purpose for me.
Great. I mean, I think I always get benefit in our conversations because I think there's always, every time we talk, to whether during our travels or on the phone, I always ended up walking away with something that I didn't know before. And I think that's that's what I hope that anyone who listens to the podcast or watches us here is able to get out of it as well. So in terms of what we're able to give people, I think maybe how can people get hold of you if they're interested in working with you, if they've got an organization that they need someone to come in and help them develop or overcome challenges. So how can people get in touch?
Well, I guess the easiest way is just my name, Tobias Demker, on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way. Of course, we can share an email here as well. In the next one, we can put an email on the template, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll be posting this up on YouTube. So in the comments section, I'll put all your contact details. And as for myself, as I've always kind of closed off my podcast, you can check out my website, peterteuscher.com. The last name spelled Teuscher for those who don't have it on their screen. And I write a blog there, and you can also contact me. And Toby and I are both available to work together as well if you like us as a team to work on your project. But again, that's not the purpose of this podcast. But if anything we've talked about is helpful for you and you want to know more, feel free to reach out, send us your comments, questions, anything you want us to cover here, and we'll get to them, and it's part of our discussion.
Yeah.
Toby, great to talk to you and see you again. It's great to start the new year this way. So appreciate your time, and for everyone joining us, thanks for tuning in, and we'll speak to you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.